name is Peggy Castro, and I'm going to be reading some poems that are loosely built around the patriarchy of our country. And I have the poems start with Emily Dickinson during the Civil War and go all the way into the present with the present poet laureate who is Native American. So it covers a wide variety of viewpoints, mostly women, because we're dealing with a patriarchy from a woman's point of view. But I also include one male poet who was the husband of Sylvia Plath. So let me begin with Emily Dickinson. She was born in Amherst, Massachusetts, to a prominent family. She attended Amherst Academy, and then she withdrew from society, rarely venturing beyond her garden gate. There were rumors that she had been involved with a minister, and after that, she just conducted her friendships by mail, by correspondence. So amazingly, she managed to command a singular brilliance of style and integrity of vision that has rarely been matched. And I'm going to pick one that I think sums up her whole life. It's called The Soul Selects Her Own Society. The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door to her divine majority, present no more. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor be kneeling upon her mat. I've known her from an ample nation, choose one, then close the valves of her attention like stone. So that's pretty much what she did. And we'll go from Emily Dickinson to Eleanor Wylie, who was almost on the opposite end of the spectrum. But there were similarities. Eleanor Wylie was born into a prominent family. She trained to be a debutante and society wife. She was famous as much for her ethereal beauty as her melodious verses. She created a scandal when she left her husband for a married man. They drifted apart, and she was involved with several other men, including the husband of a friend of hers. She produced her writing during an 8-year period and was widely published. She was very prolific during those 8 years. She wrote books, essays, and poetry that were critically received and widely popular. And I'm going to read one that I have loved for years and years and years of Eleanor Wylie, that again, I feel sums up her life. Now, let no charitable hope confuse my mind with images of eagles and of antelope. I am by nature none of these. I was being human born alone. I am being woman hard beset. I live by squeezing from a stone what little nourishment I get. In mass, outrageous and austere, the years go by in single file, yet none has merited my fear, and none has quite escaped my smile. So I just love that. And we'll go from Eleanor Wylie to Miriam Moore. And Miriam Moore was a brilliant poet, but difficult to understand. At times she would write something very direct, which I just absolutely loved. Her father was psychotic and her mother divorced him, and she raised Marianne and her brother. They were very close, and Marianne lived with her mother and took care of her, and then when she died, she became sort of a celebrity. She was widely admired by many distinguished poets, including T.S. Eliot. She was an ardent feminist, Republican, and strong Presbyterian. In her later years, she took to wearing a tricorn hat and a black cape. And I think this sums up her attitude towards poetry, and I think it sums up poetry in general, good poetry. She stated, quote, "Meter and form are not as important as delight in language and a precise and heartfelt expression." So this poem by her is incredible. And again, it deals with patriarchy, I feel, in an indirect way. The mind is an enchanting thing, like the glaze on a katydid wing, subdivided by sun, till nettings are legion, like King playing Scarlatti, like the apteryx owl as a beak, or the kiwi's rainshaw of haired feathers, the mind, feeling its way as though blind, walks with its eyes on the ground. It has memory's ear that can hear without having to hear, like the gyroscope's fall, truly unequivocal, because trued by regnant certainty. It is a power of strong enchantment. It is like the dove neck animated by sun. It is memory's eye, its conscientious inconsistency. It tears off the veil, tears the temptation, the mist the heart wears from its eyes. If the heart has a face, it takes apart dejection. It's fire in the dove neck's iridescence, in the inconsistencies of Scarlatti. Unconfusion submits its confusion to proof. It's not a Herod's oath that cannot change. So I really think that is amazing. Let's see what we have here. Goodness, I got a little lost. Okay, so we go from Miriam Moore to Sylvia Plath. And Sylvia Plath is probably widely known for her poetry and her lifestyle. It was very controversial. She perfected confessional poetry. She was an excellent student and very ambitious. Her father died when she was 8. And this left a very strong impression on her. She had a breakdown and the first of many suicide attempts at Smith College. She had 2 children with Ted Hughes and finally tragically committed suicide at 30, leaving 2 young children. She often wrote about her husband and father as Nazis. And she was very astute and brilliant, actually. And I like this observation she made, that women in the 50s she saw were relegated to secretarial pools rather than writing poetry. And this struck home to me because while I was raising my children, I worked as a secretary to attorneys rather than write poetry. So I will read one of hers that is a complete poem, and I think it is lovely, and then I will read another. The Couriers. The word of a snail on a plate of leaf, it is not mine, do not accept it. Acetic acid in a tealed tin, do not accept it, it is not genuine. A ring of gold with the sun in it, lies in a grief. Frost on a leaf, the immaculate cauldron, talking and crackling, all to itself on top of each of 9 black Alps. A disturbance in mirrors, the sea shattering its gray one. Love, love, my season. And I'm also going to include part of her most famous poem. It's called Daddy. It was written to her father and to her husband, Ted Hughes. And she literally identifies with the Jewish people and saw both her father and her husband as Nazis. This is a long poem, and I have not included all of it. The poem is very graphic. I do recommend it. It is brilliant, but very disturbing. So, Daddy, you do not do any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time, marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco steel, and a head in the freakish Atlantic where it pours bean green over blue in the waters off beautiful Nauset. I used to pray to recover you, Akdu. So that gives you just a taste of it, and if you want to look it up, I do recommend it. But it is a little disturbing, obviously. And Ted Hughes was Sylvia Plath's husband. They were married until she committed suicide, although they separated before because of his infidelity. He was an abusive and unfaithful husband. His second wife also committed suicide, so he was difficult. He wrote poetry, prose, and children's books. He was devoted to his children and was one of the finest poets of the 20th century. He drew from nature and particularly animals. His third marriage was happy. He was often blamed for Sylvia Plath's suicide, and there were even plans by feminists to murder him. So he was quite controversial. But he was an excellent poet, and I love this poem. It's a little harsh, but I really like it. Two legends. This is from his book Crow, which is people feel is his finest work of art. Two legends. Black was the without eye, black the within tongue, black was the heart, black the liver, black the lungs. Unable to suck in light, black the blood in its loud tunnel, black the bowels packed in furnace, black too the muscles striving to pull out into the light, black the nerves, black the brain with its tomb visions, black also the soul, the huge stammer of the cry that swelling could not pronounce its son. Black is the wet otter's head lifted, black is the rock plunging in foam, black is the gall lying on the bed of blood, black is the earth globe 1 inch under an egg of blackness, where sun and moon alternate their weathers. To hatch a crow, a black rainbow, bent in emptiness over emptiness, but flying. So I love that poem. And we will go from Ted Hughes, to Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou was a bit of a celebrity, and people, I don't think they took her seriously enough because of the fact that she was very famous, but she was an excellent, excellent poet. She had a difficult childhood. She was raped by her mother's boyfriend when she was a child and mute for 5 years afterwards. She had a string of various jobs, including working as a bus driver, but finally turned to dance. She lived for a while in West Africa, and when she returned to the U.S., she joined the Harlem's Writers' Workshop and started to get her work published. She was particularly famous for her autobiographies, the most well-known being I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. She was prolific and wrote poetry, screenplays, as well as prose. She was also an actress, and she read her poetry at the Clinton inauguration, the first time a poet had done so since Frost read for Kennedy. And I will read her poem, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shout at me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but like the air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meetings of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise, into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So that's a very powerful poem. Let's see, I'm getting a little lost again. So from Maya Angelou, we'll go to Mary Oliver. And Mary Oliver, I'm sorry, is my favorite. She writes about nature and does not sentimentalize it, and it's been a solace to her. She was inspired by nature and took many long walks during which she wrote. And she retreated to nature after being molested as a child, and she wrote of making a conscious decision to be happy and leave behind the iron of her father and the iron of her mother, which is how she described it. She drew her strength from nature and from her partner, Mary Malone Cook. So she did withdraw from the patriarchy, and almost completely. So anyway, it was not an easy choice. She wrote a poem called The Journey, which details the emotional strength it took to do what she did. The journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundries, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the clouds, through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So that was her decision. And Wild Geese, another poem I'm going to read, shows the fruits of that decision. Wild geese, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calling to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So I just love that poem. She is also one of the most widely published poets in the country, and obviously very, very popular. And then we will go to Margaret Atwood, and Margaret Atwood is best known for *Handmaid's Tale*, and she has a unique perspective because her father was an entomologist, and his work led him to the North Country of Quebec, where Atwood lived until she was 12. So she had an outsider's look at society, and it gave her a different take on it. She was a prolific poet and novelist and widely awarded. She was most famous for *Handmaid's Tale*, and again has many awards and honors. She was divorced and lived with her partner on a farm until his recent death in Canada. She has a wicked sense of humor and seems to be enjoying the fame that is coming to her late in life. She has a particularly strong sense of the abuse of power and how it is used in society. And this is something that comes from Power Politics. It's a book she wrote about politics between men and women and society. We hear nothing these days from the ones in power. Why talk when you are a shoulder or a vault? Fists have many forms. A fist knows what it can do. Without the nuance of speaking, it grabs and smashes. From those inside or under, words gush like toothpaste. Language, the fist proclaims by squeezing, is for the weak only. So that is a very powerful poem. And I'm going to conclude with Joy Harjo. She is currently the Poet Laureate of the United States. And she is a Native American and belongs to the Muskogee and Creek Nations. This is the first time a Native American has held the honor of Poet Laureate. She is also an artist and musician and uses oral tradition in her work. And she was also a single parent and raised 2 children on her own. Faith. In Krakow, the spires of churches fit the skyline exactly. They have been rendered by prayers of the faithful who built the church on their knees. My faith is a limp thing in this distant city, strung together with cold rains and clouds. Crows mark the border between despair and joy. They are poets of noise, needed because the question is too big to fit one city, one church, or one country. I am far away from the answer. Wherever I go this dark month of the overthrow, the sleep of idiots would be sweet, but disastrous. I might miss the feet of God disguised as trees. So that is lovely. And I'm going to conclude with a poem of mine from the viewpoint of a single parent who actually fell through the cracks and saved by grace of God, literally. So I talked to my therapist today by telephone. Not always a good idea. I am left with a barrage of memories and feelings washing over me in darkness. To be a single mother in our society is to be a target, and the fall could be deadly. I am left with the fact that there was absolutely no one to cushion that fall. Yet my children and I survive, which leaves me bewildered and confused, searching for answers in angel wings and tea leaves, face to face with a strange God whom I do not understand. So that concludes Poets and the Patriarchy, and I would suggest that you pick out the ones you enjoy, look up a few more, and do your own take. How do you relate to the patriarchy? You can do it from the point of view of a woman, of a victim, of a survivor, or you could go like Ted Hughes and do it from a male's point of view. Anyhow you look at it, it is always interesting to sit back and look at the structure of society and the patriarchy, and poets, I think, do that best. Anyway, thank you very much.